Hello all again. Now here is the second lesson for this week. It's the theory of the sociology of emotions by Arlie Hoschild. And she is an interesting theorist because she really in some sense invented or created this whole field of the sociology of emotions. And so it's kind of kind of quite a kind of amazing in some sense that she helped create this whole kind of important field within sociology. So today I'm really going to be talking or kind of going through the reading a fair bit. So rather than having kind of a separate section of this video about the reading, most or much of this reading is really going to be going through the reading that you have. So rather than me kind of talking about it specifically, at some points you're going to see it all the way through. But I'm going to be adding in some extra bits as well. So there's that. Okay, so let me begin. And again, as always, you want to have your, handout with you as you, watch this video. So how to begin? So the best way to begin, I think, is to think about how we normally might think about our emotions or our feelings. So this is how I think, this is how I summarize, I think most people kind of imagine their feelings. Okay, first off, feelings are something that are inside of us. That seems pretty, reasonable, right? That feelings are, something psychological. There's something in our heads. Sometimes in our heart. That's the way we talk about feelings. We can kind of separate the head and the heart. It's kind of an interesting historical difference. But no matter what, the feelings are inside, either inside of our heart or inside of our heads, right? So they're inside of us. They're private. Feelings are very personal. Feelings are very private. Sometimes they're almost hidden, right? That the idea is that nobody can really know how you're feeling, right? Only you can know inside, what your feelings are like and what you're going through, right? And so feelings are something very personal and private, and they're very separated off. Lastly, sometimes we think about our emotions as kind of uncontrolled, right? We talk about this in a way sometimes. We talk about bursts of anger. They fell apart and they started crying. That our feelings are something that just kind of happen, out of the blue. Anger just kind of rages up out of you, or sadness, or laughing even. That you get so happy and you start laughing, right? And so we think of our emotions as something inside of us, right? As something private and personal, right? Nobody else can know how we're feeling, and as something that are sometimes kind of uncontrolled, bursts of emotion. What we're going to see today is that actually the sociology of emotions actually kind of disputes a lot of this. It says, no, actually, emotions aren't just inside of us. Emotions are out there. Emotions are something social, right? They are not just inside, but they are collective. They're happening not just in your own mind, but in a general, they're happening between people, right? Not just inside of a person. And so secondly, in that way, they're not just private. They're not hidden. Emotions are collective. They are things that are felt together, right? Not just personal and private, but things that groups of people feel in sync, right? Or feel at the same time. And that rather than being uncontrolled, emotions are often managed, right? They are managed in the sense that we tamp them down, we stop feeling, but also managed in the sense that we often create feelings. We make ourselves feel things. Okay, so let me now kind of talk more specifically about what Hoschild discusses in her reading. And so what are some of the things she talks about? So the first thing she discusses in the reading is this idea or concept of feeling rules. So let's start there. So what are feeling rules? So what Hoschild says is, okay, we all, in sociology, we know the idea of norms. right? The idea of norms is a very old idea. So what are norms? Norms are the rules of behavior, right? They are, things that you're not allowed to do and things that you're supposed to do, right? These can be formal norms or formal rules, like, the speed limit. That's a formal rule, right? It's written down. It's, there's a specific rule that you're supposed to follow, 25 miles an hour. But often the rules of social life are informal, right? They're not written down. They're just rules that you're supposed to follow, right? So everything from saying please and thank you to wearing clothes. These are things that we just know how we're supposed to act. Nobody has to tell us. Nobody has to, write it down for us. We know what the expectation or the rules of social life are. Okay, so normally what we think of norms is we think of them as rules of behavior, right? Decorum, etiquette. But what Hoschild is saying with feeling rules is there's not just rules for how we're supposed to act, there's rules for how we're supposed to feel. That it's not just expectations of behavior, it's expectations of emotions, right? Not just how we're supposed to act, but how we're supposed to feel in a specific situation or circumstance, right? And so our feelings are in some sense controlled, right? There's an expectation of feeling that is required of us, right? That we're supposed to conform to, just like we're supposed to conform to behavior norms. So she kind of the way to see this more is to talk about what kind of feeling rules are there. And she says, okay, well, there's three types of feeling rules that we can really see. What's the first rule? So feeling rule for simply, what kind of emotion are you supposed to be having right now, right? In a particular social circumstance, a particular social environment, what is the expectation of feeling or emotions that you're supposed to have, right? And so you can think about this in specific circumstances, right? I think the best example is, a funeral, right? That when you go to a funeral, there is a pretty strict rule that you're supposed to feel mournful, that you're supposed to feel sad, that you're supposed to be upset, right? If you go to a funeral and you're laughing and you're cracking jokes and you're being hilarious, you're most likely breaking a pretty important rule, and people are going to be very offended and very upset at you, right? Even if just not being sad at a funeral, you're breaking a rule, right? There's a kind of a really pretty strict expectation that when you go to a funeral, you're going to be mournful, you're going to be sad, even if you don't know the person, even if you didn't know the person and you don't really have any feeling about them, you're going to be expected to exhibit and have an emotion of mournfulness and grief that this person has died. And that's pretty obvious, I think. But we can think of it the opposite way, right? What happens when we go to a party, right? When you go to a party, right, you are expected to be happy, right? It's not just that you are allowed to be happy at a party. It's not just that you're allowed to be crazy and out of control and having fun. You are expected to have fun, right? You're expected to be a fun person at a party, right? You're expected to laugh. You're expected to be, getting rowdy, right? Depending on the party, right? But, there is not just how you're supposed to act, but how you're supposed to feel at a party, right? And we even have a name for people who don't conform to that, right? They're called party poopers, right? They bring us down. They stand in the corner. They're not acting happy, right? And, they're being deviant. They're breaking the rule, not a rule of behavior, a rule of feelings. Right? And so we can think of many different circumstances: weddings, um, going to church, um, all types of circumstances, first dates, right? All types of situations in which you're supposed to have a certain feeling exhibited to other people, right? Again, it's not just how you act, it's how you feel, right? So, right? So first off, just a rule, simply, what kind of emotion do you have? again, the thing to remember is um, that's not hard to follow. Why? Because emotions are actually contagious. If everybody around you is, you're at a party and everybody around you is acting happy without you knowing it and without you even stopping yourself, you're going to get happy, right? You're going to pick up on the emotions of other people, right? Emotions are not just something that you yourself are feeling, emotions are collective. We feel things in groups, right? Together we feel happy at a party. Together we feel sad at a funeral, right? And so emotions are not just personal, private things. They're things shared amongst a whole group of people, and we feel them together, right? Emotions are collective things. They are contagious. A bunch of people feel something, and then eventually everybody will feel that thing. Okay, so, what feeling is expected of you? Okay, but it's not just a feeling rule for what you're supposed to feel, but it's also rules about how strongly you can feel something, right? So, beyond getting the feeling right, what you also have to get right is how long or how strong to exhibit that feeling, right? So again, we can think of examples of this. So think about the party again, right? There's examples of people who get too rowdy, right? They got the feeling right. They're fun and jovial, but they overdo it, right? They become too crazy and too out of control, right? They got the feeling right, but they overdid it. And so they've actually ended up breaking the rule, right? They're becoming what we might call obnoxious or, something like that, right? Um, or example of, how angry you can be at somebody, right? Somebody does something offensive, right? Or they insult you, or they say something inappropriate, or something that you take offense at, and you get really, really angry at them. And then what do they say? They say, "Oh, don't be so angry," right? What they're trying to say is, okay, you can be a little bit angry at me, but the amount of anger that you're showing is too much, right? You're exhibiting this emotion too strongly. You're getting the rule wrong, right? So we have all sorts of examples of you get the emotion right, but you got the strength of it wrong. You're too happy at a party. You're too angry in an argument. What else? Um, how long you can feel something, right? So you got the strength right, you got the emotion right, but either you don't do it long enough, or you do it for too long, right? So we have rules about how the length of a feeling, how long a feeling can go on. So, some examples of this. So let's imagine, somebody gets broken up with, right? Somebody gets dumped. Um, and they've only been dating for like a couple of weeks, right? You could be sad for, maybe a day or 2 days, maybe 3 days at most. But if you're sad for a month or 2 months after, you dated a person for a week, eventually your friends will come to you and say, hey, you're doing this for too long. Something, this is not right. You're going on too much, right? And so again, what's happening here is people are telling you, oh, hey, you're breaking a rule. You're too sad about this breakup, right? Or funerals are another good example of this, and they're an example of how things change over time. So in modern society, in the 21st century, when somebody close to you dies, we think that you can be grief-stricken or in grieving for about 6 months to a year, right? If you're grieving for like 1 year, 2 years, if you're grieving for like more than a year, like 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, we think, oh man, there's something wrong with that person. They should go see a therapist, or they should talk to somebody because their emotion, they're too grief stricken. Their grief is not appropriate. But in the 19th century, when somebody died that was close to you, like, so say your husband or your wife died, you were now expected to be in grief for no less than 2 years, right? That you were now expected to be mournful for at least 2 years. This meant going out in black, avoiding social engagements, and just exhibiting a feeling of sadness for 2 whole years. And so we can see that, that rule has changed. And that's how we can know it's a rule. It's not just a natural feeling, right? It's not that people in the 19th century were just naturally more grief-stricken than they are now. The rule changed. In the 19th century, one thing was expected, 2 years of grief, and now we expect less. And so again, it's a good example of how the rules of mourning and grieving changed, right? How long you can, feel something. And so what this is really showing us is that rules are not just inside of us, rules are external, right? They are a social phenomenon. Durkheim would call them a social fact, right? Right? Emotions are social facts for Durkheim, and well, maybe Hoschild too. Okay, so that's feeling rules. What's next? What's the next concept? Rule reminders, something Hoschild also talks about in the reading. So how do we know the rules? So there's these rules out there that exist, what emotion to feel at a party, how angry to be at somebody, how long to be upset at a breakup. How do we know the rules? Well, we are reminded of them, right? And so Hoschild calls these rule reminders. So the idea here is often what will happen is other people will remind us of the feeling rules that exist. Sometimes we remind ourselves, but often or typically it's other people who remind us of the rules. And so they will say things to us in subtle ways and sometimes not subtle ways to tell us, hey, this is the rule that you're supposed to be feeling right now. What's a good example of this? A good example of this is something simple like happy birthday, right? Somebody comes up to you, it's your birthday, and they come up to you and they say, happy birthday. You must be so happy, it's your birthday. What they're doing in a subtle way is they're not just saying, telling you, enjoy your birthday. They're telling you, hey, it's your birthday, and I'm here to remind you that you should be, or you must be, happy on your birthday, right? Birthdays there's a feeling rule connected to them. It's your birthday, you should be happy. Lots of people are unhappy on their birthdays, but the feeling rule says, hey, it's your birthday, you're now expected to be happy whether or not you want to be. Okay? And so people are going to remind us of that by wishing us happy birthday, right? And in some sense, they're reminding us, they're like, happy birthday, right? And so again, what this is showing us is that our feelings are not just natural. They're not just uncontrolled. Often we have to monitor ourselves or look inside of ourselves and say, okay, what should I be feeling right now, right? Should I be happy right now? Should I be angry? What should I be angry at this person? Anger is a good example of this. We often question our own anger, right? Should I be angry at what this person did to me? And what you're really asking yourself when you do that is you're saying, am I allowed to feel angry? Does the feeling rule let me be angry, right? And so what often when we're interrogating ourselves is we're asking ourselves, what's the right feeling rule that I should be having right now? Okay? So there's rule reminders. Sometimes they're subtle, like happy birthday, but sometimes they're direct. Sometimes people will say to us, for example, parents, right? They'll say, "Oh, you should be ashamed," right? That you do something wrong, you lie, or something like that, and your mother or father comes up to you and you say, "Oh, you should be ashamed of what you've done." But what they're saying is, you should be feeling this thing, right? You should be feeling something like this, right? Or if somebody, something, you're not feeling the right thing, and people will say, hey, you should be, you should be feeling this. You shouldn't be so upset, or, get over it. The example I gave before, the argument with a friend, you say, you get upset and your friend says, don't be so angry. They're trying to remind you, they're trying to force you to follow a certain emotion. You can be deviant. You can break the rule, but you know, as always, there's consequences to breaking a rule. Right? You can do it, but just like other rules, other informal norms, breaking a feeling rule comes with its own consequences. Okay, so we got the first part. We got feeling rules and rule reminders. So all this leads up to Hoschild's main concept, which is emotion work. And this is a key thing here. So we have these rules of behavior. We have these rules of emotions, not behavior. We have reminders of these rules. So what do we do now? We have to manage our emotions. We have to try to conform to these rules. We have to try to make our feelings fit into the appropriate rule. And Hoschild calls this motion work, emotion management, really, right? It's getting your emotions to be where they're supposed to be. It's conforming your emotions to the correct rule. So why is it called work? It's called work because it can be difficult, right? It can be difficult not to be angry when somebody really, is making you angry. It can be hard to make yourself feel happy when going to a party, right? It's work because it takes a lot of effort to manage your emotions, to get your emotions to push them or pull them to where they're supposed to be is tiresome. And so thus the idea of work and emotion work is quite good, right? It's quite apt, right? So emotion work is really emotion management, and managing and controlling your emotions so that you conform to the correct feeling rule. Hoschild breaks this up into two parts. She talks about suppression and evocation. So what are these? So suppression is pretty clear. Suppression is when you stop yourself from feeling something, right? You're about to feel something that would make you deviant or break a feeling rule, and so you suppress it, right? So let's say that you're working at a coffee shop and a customer is really rude to you, and you feel like swearing at them or you feel really angry, but you know you can't do that. So what do? You suppress it. You smile and through gritted teeth, and you stop yourself from exhibiting that emotion, right? You smile and politely say, here's your change, right? And so a lot of our emotion work is suppressing emotions, stopping ourselves from feeling angry, stopping ourselves from feeling sad, right? So another example of this is, people don't cry in public, right? If people are really sad and they got upsetting news, like somebody broke up with them, they got a bad diagnosis, and they feel like crying, they feel like really upset. Often people won't do that if they're in public. They will suppress their emotions. They will control their sad feelings till they're in private, right? Till they're in the backstage, right? And then when they don't no longer have to perform, then they will let it out. Then they will cry. So that's suppressing. That's pretty obvious. But what Hoschild also says, it's not just about suppressing a feeling, but it's also about creating a feeling, right? That often what we have to do is produce or make ourselves feel something, right? Make ourselves feel sad at the funeral. Make ourselves feel angry, right? Sometimes we think to ourselves, oh, I should be angry. I don't really feel it, but I should be angry, so I'm going to make myself angry. Right? They can't treat me that way, and so you make yourself feel angry. A good example of this is, going to a party, right? You don't really feel in the mood, right? It's Friday, it's been a long week, you just want to sit at home, watch Netflix, but you got to go to a party because it's your friend party or whatever. And so you have to pump yourself up. You have to psych yourself up, right? And people do this, right? They turn on music, they have some drinks, they pre-game, right? They do all sorts of things to get themselves in the mood, right? You're about to go out on the town or whatever, and so you have to make yourself in the mood, and so people do things to get themselves where they're supposed to be, right? That's what Hoschild would be called creating a feeling. What else does she say? Here's an important point that makes herself different, makes her work different from Goffman. So in the previous lesson, we saw that Goffman is talking about performing, and so we can go on and say, oh, well, it seems like Hoschild is saying something very similar, and what we're really doing is we're just performing emotions. We don't, we're angry at a customer, but we give the performance of politeness. We don't want to be at a party, but we give the performance of being happy, right? So it feels like we're just pretending or faking. But Hoschild says, no, it's more than that. And she makes a distinction between surface acting and deep acting. And so what she says is, okay, yes, some of the emotion work that we do is surface acting. It's just pretending, right? We're angry at a customer, but we pretend to be nice, right? We're bored on a first date, but we pretend to be interested, right? That the outside, our performance does not match the inside. And so we can call that surface. We're just kind of pretending, we're laughing at jokes that are not funny, that type of thing. But what Hoschild says, okay, it's not just that surface acting. She says there's also what we can call deep acting. And so deep acting isn't just pretending to feel a certain way, but it's actually making yourself inside feel a certain way. It's actually getting yourself to be happy at a party. It's making yourself feel sad at a funeral, right? That it's not just pretending or giving an external performance, but it's a change in the inside emotional state that you make yourself happy, right? And so she calls this deep acting. It's a way of acting in which you really take on the role and you become that person, you become that feeling. You're not pretending to feel that way, you're making yourself feel that way, really. And so that's kind of different than Goffman, that it's not just presenting a self to other people, it's making your emotional state, your emotional self be a certain way. Okay, the last part of all this then is an important element, which kind of Hoschild talks, and this goes beyond your reading a little bit. Hoschild talks about emotional labor. So here's the important thing: the emotional labor is different from emotion work. So even though they sound very similar, we have to understand these are two different concepts. Very connected, very similar, but also distinct. Okay, so emotion work is emotion management, right? How you manage or work on your emotions to get them to conform to a role. Emotional labor is emotional work that we do as part of an actual job. Emotional labor is emotion work that you get paid for, right? It's managing and controlling your emotions as part of your job, right? So we can think of this as a good example of, the coffee shop, working at a coffee shop. What's part of your job of working at a coffee shop or being a waiter? It is part of your job is being nice to the customers. That's the main part or the key part of your job, right? That you have to manage and control your emotions to the extent to appear pleasant and nice, right? That's your job, actually, right? So your labor, the thing that you're getting paid for, is the management and control of your emotions, right? The research that Hoschild herself did is on airline stewardesses. Right? So this was back in the 1970s, 1980s, when they were mostly women working this job. And she said, okay, being an airline stewardess was really hard. It was very difficult. You're in this confined space for many hours at a time. It's, it can be very stressful. But a big part of the job is controlling your emotions to appear pleasant and nice, right? To appear like that you're happy doing this job. That's what you're paid for, right? And so many service jobs are emotional labor jobs. We are getting paid to control and manage our emotions for it. And so Hoschild calls this the commercialization of emotions. And she's kind of a bit critical of this, right? That she's kind of is kind of a bit wondering if this is a good thing, right? That we're paying people for managing, controlling their emotions. An important part of this emotional labor is it's not just that you're controlling your own emotions, but you're controlling or managing other people's emotions, right? So, if you're an assistant, what you're doing is you're not just managing your own emotions, but you're kind of trying to manage the emotions of your boss, right? You're, at a coffee shop or waiter, you're not just managing and controlling your own emotions, but you're trying to make the customer have a good experience, have a good emotion, right? And so emotional labor isn't just about you and your emotions, but it's about also that you're trying to manage and influence other people's emotions. Again, that's what your job is. That's what you're getting paid for. She mentions that some of the important parts of this is that emotional labor is gendered. Um, Women do emotional labor more than men, right? That much more of these jobs are, um, you know, more often jobs worked by women, right? This has changed, I think, maybe in the last 10, 15, 20 years since Hoschild has done some of this work, but some of it hasn't, right? I think there's still, to a certain degree, that women are expected to manage and control their emotions and help the emotions of other people more so than men, right? Both genders do this, but maybe a bit more on women is expected. And the real kind of critical thing she talks about is, maybe what happens is that emotional labor creates emotional dissonance. What she means by this is there's a disconnection now between the emotions that a person is supposed to perform, right? Either through deep acting and surface acting, and the emotions that they are really feeling, right? All day, if you work at a coffee shop for, many hours a day and you encounter many rude customers, you may feel like you want to be angry, but you can't be angry. And so there's this disconnection or dissonance between how you want to feel, feelings you really have, and the feelings that you're allowed to have, right? So this kind of really creates an emotional disconnection. And then she also talks about emotional burnout, right? That people can do jobs that are, in some sense, are really emotionally taxing, right? That really take a lot of emotional labor. Kind of think about maybe being a nurse or, a job in which you're dealing with people who are in pain and suffering and, are having a bad experience. And a lot of your job is trying to make sure that they're okay, right? You have to be nice and polite to them. And also you have to try to make them feel better. And this is draining, right? This is sucking your emotional strength away. And so you're in some sense can be selling your emotions, right? That you're giving your emotions away for money, and at the end of the day, you might not be left with much emotions left for yourself. So she's really critical of this, of this emotional labor. That how we are now paying people not just for their work, their physical labor, but for their emotional labor that they're doing, and that this comes with its own stresses, right, of being taxed emotionally, and feeling a disconnection with yourself and your emotional state. And so I think Hochschild's work is really interesting. It shows really an advance on this whole field of kind of the experience of everyday life, and it shows us that our feelings, something that we think we are very close to, we think of our feelings as personal, private, and inside of us. Nobody can know how we're feeling. But what Hoschild shows us is actually, in many ways, our feelings are social, collective, and they must be managed. And we are often, sometimes, paid for our emotional control, right? That emotional labor, this idea of emotional labor, that often we're paid for our emotion work. Okay, that's it for this lesson.